The rain wouldn't stop. It drummed against the cracked window pane of Elena Cruz's tiny apartment like a warning she didn't want to hear. Water streaked down the glass in crooked silver lines, blurring the city outside into a mess of lights and darkness. The kind of night that felt like a storm was coming. The kind of night that always found its way to Dominic Romano. She sat on the edge of her bed with her phone in her hand, thumb hovering above the keyboard. Her heart was loud in her chest. It wasn't just a beat anymore, it was a hammer. She'd rehearsed this message in her head for weeks. She'd drafted and deleted it too many times to count, but this time she didn't stop herself. She typed the words slowly, as if every letter was a small rebellion. Leave me alone. 3 simple words. But in Dominic Romano's world, words like that weren't a request. They were a spark. Her finger hovered for a moment longer, shaking slightly. She wasn't stupid, she knew who he was. What he was. His name carried a kind of power that made the entire city whisper. His world was all black suits and silent guns, gold rings and red blood. And she had stumbled into it like a moth into a flame. She hit send, and for one blissful heartbeat, the world stood still. Then her phone buzzed. Once the reply came faster than she'd expected. Dominic, too late. Elena's chest tightened. She stared at the screen as if maybe she'd imagined it. She didn't. The message was real, crisp and cold like him. The phone buzzed again. Then again. A call. She let it ring. Another one. Then another dot. By the time the call log reached 15 missed calls, her breathing had turned shallow. Her hands felt icy, her throat tight. She threw the phone onto the bed like it was poisonous. The glow of the name, Dominic Romano, burned against the dark room like a warning. She whispered to herself, "He won't come. He won't." But even she didn't believe that. The storm outside grew louder. The sky cracked with distant thunder. Somewhere far below on the wet street, tires splashed through puddles. She peeked through the curtain just in time to see the black SUV stop under the street lamp. She knew that car. She'd seen it before. 2 men in dark coats stepped out, umbrellas snapping open in perfect unison. Then him. Dominic Romano didn't rush. He didn't need to. He stepped out into the rain like a king walking into a room he already owned. His black suit clung to him in the downpour, but he didn't seem to notice. He looked up once, straight at her window. Her breath caught. He'd found her. The knock on the door was soft. Too soft, like the kind of knock that doesn't ask permission. It warns. She didn't move. Elena. His voice slipped under the door like smoke. Smooth, low, dangerous. Her fingers gripped the blanket tighter. "Go away," she whispered. "You shouldn't have ignored me. I told you to leave me alone, and I told you," he said calmly, "it's too late." The handle turned, slowly, not forced, not violent, just inevitable. When the door opened, the storm stepped in with him. Dominic filled the doorway like he filled a room completely. His suit was dark, rain-soaked. His hair slicked back against his forehead, drops sliding down the line of his jaw. He didn't look angry. He looked certain. Behind him, 2 men in black suits waited in silence. "Bodyguards, shadows, 15 calls," he said, stepping inside. His voice was soft, but it cut through her like a blade. "You didn't answer a single one?" She backed up. "Because I don't want you here." He shut the door behind him with a quiet click. The sound echoed louder than any shout. "But I'm here." The small living room felt even smaller with him in it. His presence had a way of swallowing space, like the air itself bowed to him. He slipped off his black gloves slowly, deliberately, and placed them on the table as if he had all the time in the world. "Dominic, I mean it," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I can't do this. I can't be in your world." He tilted his head, watching her like a wolf studies a trembling deer. My world? He murmured. Sweetheart, you were in my world the moment I looked at you. Her pulse jumped. She hated that his voice could do that to her. I don't want to belong to you, she said through clenched teeth. He smiled faintly. You don't get to decide that anymore. Elena turned toward the kitchen, putting space between them. Her bare feet were cold on the wooden floor. She grabbed the counter like it might steady her, but her hands were still shaking. You can't keep doing this, she whispered. You can't just show up like you own everything. Dominic's footsteps followed, slow, controlled. He never rushed. He didn't need to. When he spoke again, his voice was closer, and she felt the heat of his presence at her back. I don't own everything, he said softly. I own what's mine. She turned sharply, her heart in her throat. I'm not yours. His eyes didn't flinch. Then why are you shaking like you already know you are? Her breath hitched. She hated how his words crawled under her skin, how they sounded like a promise instead of a threat. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The only sound was the storm outside and the slow tick of the wall clock. Rainwater dripped from his suit onto the floor, leaving small dark stains. He reached out, not to grab her, just to touch her wrist lightly. The warmth of his fingers burned through her skin. You should have answered, he whispered. She pulled her hand back like she'd touched fire. You're not listening to me. I always listen to what's mine. I'm not. His hand caught the side of her jaw, gently but firmly. Not rough. Not tender. Just his way of reminding her that running wouldn't work. His thumb brushed against her pulse, feeling how fast it was beating. 15 calls, he said quietly. I don't beg. I don't wait. I come. A flash of headlights through the window caught her attention. She turned just enough to see another car joining the SUV outside. 2 men stepped out. Not his. His jaw tensed immediately. The softness in his face vanished. Elena, he said, voice turning sharp. Who's been near your building lately? She blinked. No one. I don't know. He cursed under his breath, pulling his phone out, barking a command to someone she couldn't hear. His men outside moved fast. The way their formation shifted made her stomach twist. Danger wasn't coming. It was already here. Dominic turned back to her, his face hard as stone. You're not safe here. She shook her head. No, I'm not going with you. You don't have a choice. He took a step forward. She took a step back, but there was nowhere left to run. The knock on the door this time wasn't soft. It was hard, loud, wrong. His men pulled their guns. Dominic's hand brushed against his holster, a smooth, practiced movement. He leaned in close enough that his breath brushed against her ear. Stay behind me, he whispered. Her knees felt weak. Dominic, stay. The door burst open before she could argue. 3 men in black stormed in, shouting in a language she didn't understand. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Everything blurred. The rain, the shouting, the sound of gunmetal. Dominic moved like the storm itself. 1 shot, 2 down. A fist to the jaw. A kick against the door. One of his men tackled the 3rd. The room reeked of gunpowder and rain dot, and through it all, he never took his eyes off her. He walked toward her slowly after it was over, his suit darker with rain and someone else's blood. He crouched down in front of her as she sat on the floor, shaking. Do you understand now? He said softly. Her breath was ragged. What just happened? They were watching you. They've been waiting. You sent that message? He exhaled slowly, brushing a bloodied hand against his jaw. And they took it as an opening? She swallowed hard. You're saying this is my fault? He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a growl. No, it's mine. For letting you out of my sight. She stared at him, the man everyone feared. The man she should have feared too. But instead, she felt that same dangerous pull that had ruined everything. He reached up, cupped her face with one blood-streaked hand, and whispered against her ear, not loud, not soft. That final, "You're not walking away from me, Elena. Not now. Not ever." The storm outside roared louder, thunder shaking the window panes. But inside that tiny room, she felt something even more dangerous than the men at her door. Dominic. Romano. 15 missed calls hadn't been desperation. They'd been a warning, and now it was already too late. The apartment smelled like gunpowder and rain. Broken glass crunched under boots. Water pooled on the wooden floor where the storm had slipped in with the men who tried to take her. Elena sat against the wall, shaking, wrapped in a thin blanket Dominic had pulled from the couch. She couldn't stop staring at the bodies, black shapes on the floor, rainwater dripping down their boots. They were dead, real people, real blood. Not a movie, not some story. This was what it meant to be in Dominic Romano's orbit. The silence was worse than the gunfire had been. Outside, rain still fell in soft, steady sheets. Inside, the world had stopped moving. Dominic stood in the center of the room, shoulders broad beneath his soaked black shirt. His gloves were streaked red, but he wasn't breathing hard. He wasn't panicking. His pulse was steady. He'd done this before. Probably too many times. Marco stepped inside from the hallway. His black coat clung to him, and his gun was still warm in his hand. He spoke in a low voice to Dominic in Italian, clipped, quick words Elena didn't understand. But she could tell what it meant. They weren't finished. Dominic's jaw tightened. He flicked his wrist, issuing an order. Within seconds, 2 of his men started dragging the bodies out. A third began boarding up the broken window. The room that had been her safe little apartment for 2 years was now a war zone. And a crime scene. Elena swallowed, voice shaking. What just happened? Dominic's head turned toward her slowly. Even blood-streaked, even rain-soaked, he carried himself like a man no one dared interrupt. "What happened," he said quietly, "is exactly why I told you to answer the phone. I didn't ask for this." His steps were slow but deliberate as he approached. "You didn't have to. You stepped into it the second you met me." She pressed her back harder against the wall. "Dominic, this isn't my world. It is now." He knelt down in front of her, bringing himself to her eye level. He didn't touch her. He didn't have to. The weight of his presence made her heart pound against her ribs like it was trying to escape. "You could have died tonight," he said softly, but there was nothing soft in his eyes. They burned like the edge of a blade. "Do you understand that?" Her hands trembled in her lap. "Then why didn't you just leave me alone?" A dark smile touched his lips, small, dangerous. "Because I don't let go of what's mine." "I'm not yours," she snapped back, louder than she meant to. He leaned closer. Rainwater dripped from his hair, sliding down the edge of his jaw. "Then why did they keep trying to take you from me?" She froze. His words weren't a question. They were a truth she didn't want to face. Marco returned, his tone clipped. "Boss, we should move her, now." Dominic didn't look away from her. "The car. Ready. We've secured the perimeter. There might be more." Elena's breath caught. "More?" Dominic rose to his full height. The warmth that had flickered in his voice moments ago was gone. "Mikhail doesn't just send scouts," he said, pulling his coat off the back of a chair. "He sends messages. Who is Mikhail?" She asked, standing slowly. He didn't answer right away. He slipped his arms into the black coat, buttoned it with quiet precision, and then turned to her. "A man who wants something that isn't his." She hated the way her pulse skipped when he said it. "And what does he want?" "You." Dominic reached out. She stepped back. His hand didn't chase her. It waited. Like him, patient, dangerous, inevitable. "Pack whatever you need," he said. "I'm not going anywhere with you." He tilted his head slightly, the way he always did before saying something she didn't want to hear. Elena, you just survived a hit. Her throat tightened. Because of you. Because of me, he echoed softly. You're still breathing. His voice was low, steady, but it carried the kind of truth that cracked through the noise in her head. He was right. She hated it, but he was right. She moved into the bedroom with shaky steps. Her hands fumbled over the dresser as she stuffed clothes into a bag she never thought she'd need to run. Her mind screamed at her to run alone, to disappear. But even as the thought formed, a colder voice followed. If Dominic couldn't keep her safe, no one could. She zipped the bag shut with trembling fingers. When she turned around, he was already standing in the doorway, watching her. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. His silence was worse than shouting. She hated how calm he looked, like this was nothing more than another night. Another war. They walked down the dim hallway together, his men flanking the sides like shadows. The black SUV waited at the curb, its windows dark against the rain. Her apartment building, the place where she'd built the smallest piece of peace in her chaotic life, felt like it was already gone the moment she slid into the back seat. The door shut with a heavy thud, like a lock clicking into place. The world outside disappeared behind tinted glass. Dominic sat beside her, his arm resting on the seat between them, fingers tapping lightly against the leather. The car smelled faintly of gun oil and expensive cologne. The men in the front said nothing. The city passed outside in a blur of rain and lights. She hugged the bag to her chest. Where are you taking me? Somewhere they can't reach you. She turned toward him, anger and fear twisting inside her. Why do they want me? Because they can't get to me. So I'm just a pawn, she whispered. He glanced at her, eyes dark. You're not a pawn, Elena. You're the only thing they know I'll bleed for. Her chest tightened at the quiet rage beneath those words. The car slowed as they turned onto a private road outside the city. Tall iron gates loomed ahead, lights cutting through the rain. She stared as the gates opened, revealing a massive estate. Stone walls, tall windows glowing with warm golden light. Armed men patrolling the perimeter. It wasn't just a house. It was a fortress. She whispered. What is this place? My home, Dominic replied. No, she said, shaking her head. No, I'm not staying here. Yes, he said softly, you are. The car stopped under a wide archway. One of the men opened her door, holding an umbrella over her as she stepped out. The rain had softened to a steady drizzle, but the air was cold against her wet skin. Dominic followed, coat collar turned up against the night, his posture straight and unshuckable. Inside, the mansion felt like another world. Warm firelight flickered against dark wood walls. Expensive paintings hung above marble floors. Every corner hummed with quiet power. She'd never felt smaller in her life. Dominic's footsteps echoed down the grand hall. Get her a room, he ordered. Marco nodded and disappeared up the staircase. Elena turned to him, voice trembling. Dominic, I don't want this. He stopped just inches from her. It's not about what you want. Then what is it about? He leaned closer, his voice low enough to make her shiver. It's about keeping you alive. You don't get to decide that. His jaw flexed. I already did the second I walked through your door. Her eyes burned with unshed tears. You're a monster. He didn't flinch. He didn't deny it. Yes. The honesty in that single word made her knees weak. She followed him into his study, though she didn't remember deciding to. It was like the gravity of his presence dragged her wherever he went. The study was dimly lit, lined with dark shelves and a heavy desk. A storm still rolled faintly in the distance, thunder rumbling low like a warning that hadn't passed yet. Dominic poured himself a drink. He didn't offer her one. She wouldn't have taken it anyway. You can stay in the East Wing, he said casually, as if this wasn't a prison with silk sheets. Security's tighter there. She crossed her arms. You think you can just lock me up here? He turned slowly, the faintest smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. I don't think. I know. She stared at him, at the power he carried like it lived in his blood, at the quiet violence beneath his calm. She realized then that Dominic Romano didn't just walk into people's lives. He swallowed them whole. I'll find a way out, she whispered. You won't, he replied, just as softly. Why are you doing this to me? His gaze softened, just slightly. Because the only thing more dangerous than someone trying to hurt me is someone trying to hurt you. She sank into the armchair by the fire, her entire body numb. Dominic stood across the room, one hand in his pocket, watching her like a storm that hadn't decided whether to pass or destroy. Do you hate me right now? He asked suddenly. She let out a shaky breath. Yes, good, he said. Hate me. It'll make it easier to keep you alive. She closed her eyes. The warmth of the fire couldn't melt the ice in her chest. But when she opened them again, he was still there, a shadow she couldn't outrun. He stepped closer, knelt down just enough to meet her eye level, and whispered, I told you it was too late. The fire cracked. The storm outside growled, and Elena Cruz realized she wasn't just trapped in his house. She was trapped in him. Morning came slowly at the Romano estate. The night storm had left the sky pale gray, and the rain hung in the air like it wasn't quite ready to leave. Elena sat on the edge of a massive bed wrapped in soft white sheets that smelled like nothing. Too clean, too sterile. Outside, the garden shimmered with dew, the iron gates standing tall like soldiers, but even the sunlight couldn't make this place feel safe. It wasn't home. It was a fortress. She ran her hands over the blanket, the fabric smoother than anything she owned. Everything here was polished, heavy, expensive. The kind of beauty that came with a price. She flinched when the door opened without a knock. A woman in black stepped in, tall, elegant, face blanked. She didn't smile. Breakfast is in the east dining room, the woman said. Her voice was calm, mechanical. Mr. Romano expects you. Expects. Not invites. Elena swallowed hard. I'm not hungry. The woman didn't blink. Mr. Romano expects you. And then she turned and left. The dining room looked like something out of a palace. Long oak table, tall windows, crystal chandeliers. Dominic sat at the head of the table in a black shirt, sleeves rolled to his forearms. He looked infuriatingly calm, as if last night hadn't involved dead men bleeding on her floor. A plate of eggs and toast sat untouched in front of him. Steam curled off a cup of black coffee. He didn't look up when she entered, not right away. He waited, because Dominic Romano didn't look at people. People entered his world on his time. Sit, he said finally. She clenched her jaw but sat. The chair was cold beneath her. Eat, he added, voice flat. I'm not hungry. His dark eyes lifted slowly, meeting hers. There was no threat in them. There didn't have to be. I didn't ask. She stabbed a fork into the toast just to keep her hands from shaking. I want to leave. No. Her head snapped up. Dominic, I'm serious. So am I. He leaned back in his chair, resting one hand on the table. If you walk out of here, Mikhail's men will take you before you reach the gate. Then let them. She snapped. His jaw flexed, a small, sharp movement that told her she'd just hit a nerve. You don't understand what men like him do to people they take? Then explain it to me, she whispered. He stared at her for a long, heavy moment, like he was deciding whether to let her see the darkness or keep her in the illusion. Then he spoke softly, and somehow that was worse than shouting. They don't take people, Elena. They break them. The room fell silent. Marco entered quietly, breaking the tension. Boss, Dominic didn't take his eyes off Elena. Talk. We picked up chatter, Marco said. Mikhail's guys were spotted near 58th Street. He's moving faster than expected. Elena stiffened. Mikhail. That name again. Dominic's fingers drummed slowly against the table. He's testing me. Marco nodded. Do you want me to tighten the perimeter? Double it. Marco left. The silence he left behind was heavy. Dominic looked back at her, and this time there was no softness in his voice. You see why I can't let you leave. She swallowed. I didn't ask to be in this. He tilted his head slightly. Neither did I. Later, Elena wandered through the house. She wasn't allowed outside. 2 men followed her like shadows. She hated it. She hated how they made it obvious she wasn't a guest. She was a possession being guarded. She stopped at a wall lined with old photographs. Black and white. Men in suits. A younger Dominic. Another man with him. Sharp eyes, a scar down his cheek. And beside them, a little girl. Her heart twisted. She reached out to touch the glass, just as Dominic's voice echoed from behind her. Don't. She spun around. He stood in the doorway, sleeves still rolled, a gun holstered at his side like it belonged there. His voice wasn't raised, but it didn't need to be. Who is she? Elena asked softly. His eyes narrowed slightly. That's not your concern. She looks like someone who was. Dominic's silence told her enough. He walked closer, slow and deliberate. There are things about me you don't want to know. Maybe I should. He stopped just inches from her. No, because once you do, you'll never be able to walk away. She whispered, I already can't. The corner of his mouth twitched, not a smile, something darker. That night, Dominic's world revealed itself a little more. The house didn't sleep. Guards changed shifts like a machine. Black cars came and went at the gate. She heard snippets of conversation in languages she didn't understand. Plans, deals, danger. She found him in his study again. Same desk, same storm inside him. A single photo lay on the desk, the same girl she'd seen earlier, now older, but with the same eyes. Who is she? Elena asked again. Dominic didn't look up. Someone I failed. She stepped closer. What happened to her? He finally met her gaze. There was no mask on his face this time. Mikhail happened. A chill spread down her spine. He rose slowly from his chair. He took her. I got her back, but not the way she was. Elena's chest tightened. She didn't need more details. The way his voice broke just slightly was enough. You're not leaving this house, he said quietly. Because I'm not losing someone else. Her throat burned. You don't even know me, Dominic. His steps were slow, heavy. When he reached her, he didn't touch her. He just looked at her like she was something he had already claimed. I know enough. This isn't love, she whispered. This is control. He leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear. It's survival. The night deepened. Rain threatened again outside. Dominic left the study to deal with business, as Marco called it. Elena sat alone by the fire, the sound of distant footsteps echoing through the halls. She should have been terrified of him. Maybe she was. But what terrified her more was the part of her that felt safe when he was near. She stared into the flames and whispered to herself, "What are you doing?" She didn't have an answer. She didn't sleep much. The sound of engines outside kept pulling her awake. At some point, a soft knock came at her door. Not Dominic, Marco. You need to see something, he said. She followed him to the security room. Dozens of screens lined the walls, each showing a different angle of the estate. At the edge of one screen, headlights flickered in the distance. A black car. No plates. Marco's jaw clenched. Mikhail's watching. Her stomach twisted. How do you know? Because he's done this before. Dominic entered a moment later, coat thrown over his shoulders, face hard. He didn't have to ask what was happening. He saw it. One look at the screen was enough. Lock everything down, he ordered. Yes, boss. The guards moved like clockwork. The gates were reinforced. Men took positions along the perimeter. Elena stood at the back of the room, feeling the walls close in. Your bait, Dominic said suddenly. She turned to him, startled. What? Whether you like it or not, Mikhail's not after your life, he said calmly. He's after mine. And you're how he gets to me. I didn't ask for this. He stepped toward her, gaze sharp. Do you think I asked for the girl in that photo to be taken? Do you think I asked for any of this? Her breath hitched. The way he said girl in that photo made something ache in her chest. His voice softened. Just slightly. But I'm not letting it happen again, she whispered. Why me? He stared at her long enough that she felt her skin burn. Because the second you walked into my life, you became the only thing they could use to break me. The room went quiet. Even the storm outside seemed to pause. She took a step back, heart pounding. I can't be that person. You already are. Later, when the house finally went still, she sat by the window of her room, looking at the black car still sitting at the far end of the drive. She could almost feel the eyes inside it, watching, waiting. And somewhere deep inside, she understood what Dominic had been trying to tell her since the night of those 15 missed calls. She wasn't just in his world. She was the center of the storm. Dominic appeared at her door sometime after midnight. He didn't knock. He didn't have to. You're not safe, he said softly. But you're safe here, she whispered. I hate this. I know. He stepped closer, stopping just a breath away from her. His hand hovered near her face, but didn't touch. He was a man who could destroy anything, but right then, he looked like someone trying not to break the one thing he couldn't control. I won't let him take you, he whispered, and in that quiet, storm-shadowed hallway, Elena Cruz realized something terrifying. She believed him. Night carried a strange silence, the kind that came before something broke. The air at the Romano estate hung heavy, thick with the weight of a storm that hadn't arrived yet. Even the guards pacing the perimeter seemed sharper, their boots hitting the wet gravel in perfect rhythm. From the window of her room, Elena watched the dark forest that bordered the mansion. The wind made the trees sway, their shadows stretching long across the lawn. Somewhere out there, she knew, Mikhail's men were waiting. A few hours earlier, Marco had said something she couldn't get out of her head. When they come, they won't knock. She wrapped her arms around herself, even though the room wasn't cold. She hated how quiet everything was. Quiet didn't mean safe. Quiet meant the enemy was close. The door opened without a sound. Dominic stepped inside, dressed all in black again, black shirt, black coat, gun holstered at his side. His hair was damp, as if he'd just come in from the night. But what struck her most was his eyes, hard, unreadable. They'll make their move tonight, he said simply. No softness, no warning, just fact. She swallowed. How do you know? Because that's what I do. He walked to the window, standing beside her. From here, the mansion grounds looked calm, lit only by low yellow lights. But beneath that calm, an army waited, his. She saw the shapes of guards moving through the shadows, weapons in hand. Trucks hidden near the back gate. Watchers posted on the roof. This wasn't a house anymore. This was a battlefield. Elena whispered. What happens if they get through? Dominic's jaw clenched. They won't. You can't know that. He turned his head toward her slowly, like a wolf scenting danger. I don't gamble with the things that are mine, Elena. She flinched. I'm not, he cut her off, his voice lower, darker. Yes, you are. Downstairs, the control room buzzed with quiet tension. Marco and half a dozen men stood around the main screen. Grainy camera footage showed the outer gates. "They're out there," Marco said when Dominic entered. 3 cars. Lights off. No movement yet. Dominic leaned over the screen, fingers gripping the edge of the table. "How many?" 20. "Maybe more." "Cowards," Dominic muttered. "Hiding in the dark." He turned to his men. "Positions. North, east, and west wings. Leave the south gate open just enough to make them think we're blind." Marco nodded. "A trap?" Dominic's mouth curved into the faintest, most dangerous smile. "Exactly." Elena followed him down the stairs, even though he hadn't asked her to. She couldn't stand waiting in her room. If danger was coming, she wanted to see it coming. The front hall was alive with silent movement. Guards taking position, radios crackling softly, weapons checked. It felt like a heartbeat building to a single moment. Dominic slipped on a pair of black gloves, the leather creaking softly. His men watched him the way soldiers watch a commander they'd die for. He caught Elena's eyes as he loaded his weapon. "You're staying in the West Wing. I'm not hiding." He stepped toward her. "This isn't a debate." Her breath caught as his hand lifted to her chin, tilting her face toward his. "You don't belong in this war, Elena. You never did. But now you're in it? Because of me. Then let me stand with you." He froze just for a second. Something flickered in his eyes. Something that almost looked like pride. But then he shook his head. "You're not dying for me. And what if you die for me?" His jaw clenched hard. He didn't answer. The storm finally broke. It began with the sound of tires on wet gravel, slow, deliberate. Then the soft crack of branches breaking. The first spotlight hit the forest line. And then gunfire. Mikhail's men poured out of the shadows, like a black wave. Masks, rifles, precision. The air filled with the sharp rattle of automatic fire. Guards shouted. Bullets shattered the still night. Dominic barked an order in Italian, and his men moved like a single organism. He grabbed Elena's arm, not roughly, but with the strength of someone who didn't have time for second chances. "Go," he growled. "West Wing, now." She stumbled as he pushed her toward the stairwell, her heartbeat thundering louder than the gunfire outside. The mansion, moments ago silent, was now alive with chaos, doors slamming, boots running, gunshots cracking like thunder. She ducked into the West Wing hallway, pressing her back against the wall as bullets pinned against the metal shutters. She could hear Dominic outside, shouting commands over the radio, his voice low and controlled. He wasn't just a man now. He was a storm dot through the narrow window. She saw him move through the courtyard, black coat whipping behind him, rain slicking his hair to his forehead. He fired once, cleanly, dropping a man near the fountain. He didn't hesitate. He didn't even blink. He was the wolf they whispered about. A loud crash behind her made her spin. 2 men in dark masks forced their way in through the lower hall, Mikhail's soldiers. She froze for a split second, then bolted for the door. But one grabbed her arm. "Elena." Dominic's voice ripped through the chaos. The attacker yanked her back. She screamed, kicking, clawing at his grip. Before the second could grab her, a gunshot exploded behind them. Dominic was there. He moved like a shadow, sliding between the 2 men. One shot to the first, a brutal elbow to the second's throat. The man fell without a sound. Dominic grabbed Elena's wrist, pulling her against his chest, his breathing steady despite the chaos. "You're not going anywhere," he hissed. "Do you understand me?" Her voice trembled. "Dominic, they're everywhere. I know." He pressed a quick kiss to her forehead, so quick she barely felt it. "But so am I." The fighting dragged on. Mikhail's men breached the south gate, exactly where Dominic wanted them. Marco's team ambushed them there, cutting them off from inside. The sound of gunfire echoed through the marble halls like thunder trapped in a cage. Elena followed Dominic down the back corridor as he moved to intercept. She didn't want to slow him down, but he didn't let go of her hand either. His grip was warm, strong, unyielding. The front doors shook under the weight of another wave. Smoke filled the lower hall. Then a new sound joined the chaos, a deep, mocking laugh that carried through the storm. Mikhail himself walked through the ruined doorway like he owned the place. Tall, broad, with a cruel smile carved into his face. A dark coat hung from his shoulders. His eyes swept over the hall, lingering on the shattered glass, the bodies on the ground. And then he saw her. "Ah," Mikhail said with a thick Russian accent, "the girl." Dominic stepped in front of her without hesitation, his gun raised. "Don't." Mikhail laughed softly. "She's even prettier up close. I can see why you're losing your mind." Dominic's voice dropped to a growl. "You came to die?" "Mikhail." "No," Mikhail said, tilting his head. "I came to take back what you stole. She was never yours." "She will be," Mikhail said. Smirking, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Even the storm outside felt quieter, as if the night itself was holding its breath. The two men stood facing each other like wolves circling the same prey. Dominic's men flanked the sides, guns ready. Mikhail's soldiers shifted, waiting for a single signal. Elena felt her heart pound against her ribs. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to be part of this war, but she was the center of it. The first shot didn't come from Dominic. It came from Marco. Gunfire erupted again. The room became a blur of smoke and movement. Mikhail's soldiers scattered, firing back. Dominic pushed Elena behind a pillar, his arm wrapping around her waist like steel. "Stay down," he barked. She could hear the rage in his voice. Not panic, rage, because this wasn't just a war. This was personal. Mikhail slipped back toward the shattered doorway, smirking even as his men fell around him. "This isn't over, Romano," he shouted over the gunfire. "She'd be mine before this is done." Dominic fired at him, but he was already disappearing into the dark. The last thing Elena saw was the flash of headlights as the black cars peeled away into the rain. Then the house went silent. The storm was over, but the war had only just begun. Dominic turned back to her. Blood smeared across his gloves, rain dripping from his jaw. He looked at her like she was the only thing in the world worth fighting for, and the one thing he could still lose. He crouched down, taking her face in his hands, his touch rough but careful. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, though she could barely breathe. He leaned closer, his forehead resting against hers. The world outside didn't matter for that 1 second. "I told you," he whispered, voice low and ragged. "No one touches what's mine." The rain had finally stopped, but the silence it left behind was louder than the storm. The Romano estate looked like the aftermath of a war. Bullet casings glinted faintly in the courtyard. Black SUVs still smoked from their engines, and broken glass shimmered like scattered stars on the wet ground. Guards moved in slow, disciplined rhythm, cleaning up the mess that could never truly be cleaned. And in the center of it all stood Dominic Romano, soaked in blood. Rain and rage. Elena watched him from the shadow of the broken doorway. Wrapped in a wool blanket, he hadn't spoken since the fight ended. He hadn't looked at anyone but the gate, like he was waiting for Mikhail to step back through it so he could finish what he started. His knuckles were split open. Blood smeared down his shirt, but he stood perfectly still, like a storm balanced on the edge of a knife. She whispered his name. "Dominic." No answer. She stepped closer. Her feet crunched on glass. His jaw flexed at the sound, but he didn't turn. "Dominic," she said again, louder this time. His voice came low, rough, and dangerous. "He almost touched you." She froze behind him. The quiet fury in those words wasn't something she'd ever heard before, not even in the gunfire, not even in the storm. He turned then, slow and deliberate. His hair clung to his forehead. His eyes burned black with a kind of rage that didn't scream. It killed. He was close enough to breathe the same air as you, Dominic said. Close enough to look at you? Her heart stuttered. But he didn't. Dominic's hand slammed into the doorframe behind her, inches from her face. The wood cracked under his palm. She didn't flinch, though. Every nerve in her body screamed. He shouldn't have gotten that close. He growled. She whispered, "You can't control everything." His eyes narrowed. "I control what's mine." The words hung between them, heavy, hot, and dangerous. She wrapped the blanket tighter around herself. "Dominic, I can't be this for you. I can't be your weakness." His jaw tightened, but his voice softened, almost too quiet. "You were never my weakness, Elena. You're the only thing in this goddamn world that makes me human." She blinked. His voice wasn't like it was in the beginning, cold, ruthless. There was something broken beneath the steel now, something raw. He stepped back a little, dragging a bloody hand through his hair. "I spent years building walls so no one could ever touch me again. Mikhail broke those walls once. He won't do it twice. Dominic," he cut her off with a rough whisper, "I'm not losing you." They moved inside, away from the cold. The grand hall was still echoing with voices, guards securing the last perimeter. Marco met Dominic halfway down the corridor. His face was grim. "Boss," Marco said. "Mikhail slipped through the north woods. We tracked his convoy, but he's gone." Dominic's hands clenched at his sides. "He won't get far." Marco hesitated. "He wants her." "I know," Dominic said flatly. "We can move her to the safe house." "Out of the city." Dominic shook his head slowly. "No, boss. She stays with me." Marco's eyes flicked to Elena for a moment before nodding curtly. "Yes, sir." The unspoken truth sat heavy in the air. She wasn't just a girl anymore. She was a target, and Dominic wasn't letting her out of his sight. Hours passed. The house grew quieter, the chaos retreating into low murmurs and distant footsteps. But inside Dominic's study, it was only the two of them. The fire burned low. Shadows danced across his face as he leaned back in his chair, sleeves rolled up, blood drying on his knuckles. He hadn't bothered changing. His jaw was set, but his eyes, they were tired in a way she'd never seen before. Elena sat in the chair across from him. No guards, no words. "Just silence, Dot," she finally whispered. "You scare me." He didn't flinch. "Good, but I also feel safe when I'm with you," she said softly. "And that scares me more." His head tilted, just slightly, the way it always did when she said something that reached him. "That's because you know I'll kill for you." She closed her eyes for a moment. "That's not normal, Dominic." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Nothing about me is normal, Elena. I don't give you flowers. I give you blood. I don't promise you safety. I am your safety, and if I walk away..." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. His voice was soft, but it burned like a blade. "You won't." She stood up, heart pounding. "You can't just decide that for me." He rose too, slowly, like a predator standing from a crouch. "I already did. That's not love." He stopped in front of her. "No," he whispered. "That's war." She stared up at him, her pulse loud in her ears. "You're not letting me go, are you?" He stepped closer until there was no space between them, his breath warm against her ear. "Elena, you remind the second I made those 15 calls." Her breath caught. The storm outside had passed. But inside the study, it was just beginning. He reached out and cupped the back of her neck. Fingers warm, rough, steady. Not forcing, claiming. The weight of his touch made it hard to breathe. "You're in my world now. he said softly. And the only way out is with me? She should have been afraid. She should have pushed him away. But something inside her, the part that had stopped believing in safety long before him, leaned closer. Suddenly, the power went out. Darkness swallowed the room. A second later, the generator hummed back to life, dim golden lights flickering overhead. Dominic's eyes were still locked on hers. Marco's voice cracked through the intercom. "Boss, we found something." Dominic didn't look away. "What?" Mikhail left a message. Her stomach twisted. A message? Marco's voice was low, grim. He said, "Next time, she won't be behind your walls." Dominic's entire body went still. Not shaking. Not shouting. Just still. The way a predator stills before it kills. He turned away from her, walking to the massive window that overlooked the courtyard. The wind moved the trees outside, but inside, the air was razor sharp. "He's making this personal," Dominic muttered. "Wasn't it already?" Elena whispered. He closed his eyes for a brief second. "Yes." Then he turned back to her, not the cold mafia boss. Not the wolf she met at her door. But something more dangerous. A man who'd already decided what he would burn to keep her safe. He walked back to her slowly, like a storm returning. His hand slid against her jaw, tilting her face up. His voice was low, raw, stripped of all pretense. "I don't know how to be soft, Elena. I only know how to keep what's mine." Tears stung her eyes, but she didn't look away. "And what if I break? Then I'll hold the pieces." Her heart pounded. Her breath hitched. And somewhere between fear and gravity, she whispered, "Why me?" He leaned down, his forehead brushing against hers. "Because I stopped breathing the second I thought I'd lose you." The rain began again outside, light, soft. He kissed her forehead, not the way men in movies kissed women they loved. This was slower, heavier, a promise, a warning, a vow. "Ours," he whispered. Her knees felt weak. She didn't say yes. She didn't have to. Something deeper than words hung between them, something made of blood, war, and stolen breaths. Later, when she lay in her room, she couldn't sleep. The walls of the mansion no longer felt like a prison. They felt like the edge of a storm she couldn't escape from. And didn't want to. Dominic stood outside by the gate, rain sliding down his black coat. His men lingered at a distance, but none dared speak to him. He stared out into the woods where Mikhail had disappeared. His voice was low, meant only for the night. "You'll have to walk through hell to take her from me." Inside, Elena whispered into the dark, almost as if she could hear him. "And maybe I already walked in." By dawn, the world outside had gone quiet again, but Elena Cruz wasn't the same woman who had once typed, "Leave me alone," and Dominic Romano wasn't the same man who had made 15 calls. They were bound now, not by flowers, or promises, or soft love, but by something far stronger, far darker.